something, always there's this something far more deeply interfused. And you see it in the round ocean. He loves it. It's interesting, see? He's raised here in Nebraska, but he loves the sea. And half of these scenes that he writes about in this book come from the seashore. Like he's always talking about Christabel. Where's Christabel? Who knows where Christabel? That's where he found the starfish, huh? And,
close to Florida.
oh, is it? Okay. But he has this kinship with the sea. Now, maybe there's something more than meets the eye there.
Well, again, the metaphors. He looks at he thinks of the salt in our blood that flows through our blood as being the same salt that was in the inland sea of Nebraska and Kansas from 50 million years ago. Mm-hmm. He then goes to look at the calcium in our bones as being the same calcium that comes from the starfish and the shellfish, again, of this inland sea. We Nebraskans, had we been, this is part of our inheritance, and that this cycle of life, that what we are is, as Sagan likes to say, made of star stuff. And Eiseley likes to look in terms of where we come from as being denizens of the deep, coming from them, from there.
I was thinking also of W.H. Auden. He was a friend of Auden's. And remember, the biography tells about that incident when he met his friend, whom he had not previously met personally. He met him in New York, and they were having lunch together. And Auden asked him what was the most memorable event of his childhood. And he turned the question back on Auden. And Auden said it was the sinking of the Titanic. And Eiseley said his most memorable event was the breakout at the Nebraska State Prison in 1911 when Tom Murray broke loose with his friends, and they were finally captured out here in the snowfields, in the cornfield near Gretna. But Auden, you ask yourself, what's the kinship between Auden and Eiseley? And I also asked myself, what's the kinship between Robinson Jeffers, and Eiseley? What's the kinship between Edwin Arlington Robinson and Eiseley? Each one of them is a soulmate to Eiseley. And I think about these lines from W.H. Auden, where he says, in his For the Time Being, he says, unless you exclaim, there must be some mistake, you are bound to be mistaken. Fosdick used to say, walk around that and consider it well. Unless you exclaim, there must be some mistake, you are bound to be mistaken. Isn't that Eiseley?
Interesting.
And then, he adds this line. The inevitable is that which will happen purely by chance. Randomization.
Eiseley comes back to this theme over and over and over again. I mean, he looks at, he says that the world is not predictable, that the events that would lead to us are all random events. There's no way that we could have predicted out of the primordial soup that photosynthesis would emerge as a process, and that this process of photosynthesis would be the prime driver of all life on this planet. And then he goes on to talk about you could not have predicted that man would have emerged out of the excesses of the Pleistocene ice ages. There's just nothing there to predict our coming.
The surprise.
The surprise.
And look,
and here we are.
Carry it one step further. No predicting the sudden ballooning of the brain. Why do we have a balloon brain instead of a pea-sized brain or a walnut-sized brain like the dinosaur, was perfectly content to have all of this defense mechanism around him. This bastion of bone, that's what he thinks is important, apparently, and the brain the size of a walnut. But how can it be predicted that another form of life says, no, I don't need all that bone, I don't need all that defense mechanism. All I need is a brain. Give me more brain and less bone. What providence, what guidance is going on there?
Right.
I got to quote a couple of more poets that I think about. One is Jeffers, and here, why does Eiseley like Jeffers? I quoted this the other night, I think at Swanson. I'll quote it for you. Only the young possess the simplicity to accept a truth transcending rote or rule, so that like star-led shepherds, children see the fact of miracle. But logic the sophist clouds the maturing life. Caution replaces the fearless face of youth, till a skeptical mind prefers a plausible lie to a fantastic truth. The plausible lie, that's logic. The plausible lie, that's reason. The fantastic truth is what comes up from underneath. And the fact of miracle. A miracle, see, it's not, in Eiseley, the miracle is not chairs hanging from the ceiling, the defiance of the law of gravity. The miracle is not water flowing uphill. The miracle is not the contradiction of the laws of nature. The miracle is the transcendence of natural law and the intrusion of the unexpected. And that is what Jeffers calls the fact of miracle. Not the fiction of miracle, not pretending that all these things could happen, but the fact of what is going on right now. That is
the little fox that he plays with.
the little fox. That's good. Thank you
The
for bringing that
miracle.
in. We almost forgot the little fox, didn't we?
Go ahead.
No, you tell. We've got about 2 minutes to go.
Okay. Well, Eiseley, when he talks about the great miracle, and one of his great miracles in life, is again on one of his lonely journeys, and all of a sudden he comes on the other side of a boat that's been turned over, and he looks, and there's a baby fox, and it looks at him, and it has a little chicken bone in its snout, and it says, "I'd like to play with you," and it has its paws in that position, jaunty position of saying, "Let's play." And Eiseley's looking at this for a moment, and here's this wizened scientist of great international repute, and all of a sudden Eiseley does the same thing and goes through the same motions with the fox, and for the next 5 minutes they gamble and carouse with one another on the ground, and Eiseley picks up chicken bones with his teeth and throws them around, and the baby fox picks up its chicken bones, and they're having a grand old time. And he said, this is something you would not expect for him. And he said, now this to me is the great miracle of my life, but you're not going to see me report this to the scientific journals.
No.
This is not one of those publishable papers, and yet this is a miracle to him. This to him is the crucial miracle.
What's
for him.
miraculous about it?
You would expect, if you saw a fox sees you, human being. Humans kill foxes.
Yeah.
Time for me to go in the exact opposite direction. And here is this baby fox, and it looks out with that childlike innocence, and sees no threat. It sees a playmate, and he obliges by being its playmate.
And what are the odds that a little baby pup fox could meet a human being who would be capable of getting down on his knees and playing with him and throwing a chicken bone around with a pup fox?
Not very high.
About like winning the lottery, maybe.
Probably less.
Maybe, probably. And he calls that essay, it's in this book, it's called The Innocent Fox. You know, there's a great line from Richard Jefferies, the British naturalist. One time, some of his friends said, "Why is it, Mr. Jefferies, you write about all these things and the behavior of nature, And we go out into the woods, we go out by the sea, and we don't see all the things that you see in the natural world. And Richard Jeffries asked this question. He said, are you willing to crouch in a wet ditch and wait for 2 hours? That's the question. And Eiseley is one who is willing to crouch in the wet ditch and wait for 2 hours and more for nature to speak to him. And that is why he has something to say. Well, to quote a famous line, thus endeth the reading of the lesson for the day, The Unexpected Universe by Loren Eiseley.